What's up, guys? This is the Bird Mixtape. So, to start off, I played this guy. I think his name is Michael Buscar. It's an interesting name. So, I start with f4. My opponent plays g6. Now, this is before I really knew about the Bird Bozo Gambit, so I did not go for h4 here. For those watching at home, though, do be careful if you're going to play this. This is not sound. I think if we turn on the engine, it's going to say that, yeah, white is already -1. So, just play these moves with a grain of salt. If you don't want to play h4, that's completely your prerogative. Knight f3 is just a better move. But, you know, if you want to go to the bounce house, you can play h4. So knight f3, my opponent plays d5, I play e3, and now my opponent plays knight h6. So this is a bit interesting. We haven't really looked at this move, and I don't even think this move is covered in my course. Because it's a very weird way to play this knight h6 move. Normally, if they're going to play knight h6, they're going to do it move 1, and then they're going to get this type of position, and here you can play d3 to play for a quick e4. But in this position, where I've already committed to e3, they've played knight h6, we're going to have to think of something else, because the problem is now if we play d3 and e4, this is a tempo slower, with the pawn already having been committed to e3. So what are we going to do? Well, the short answer is, normally if they cannot play d4, it's good to play c4, and this is a perfect example of it. For reference, if they had played c5 here, now they could play d4, so do not play c4 here. A really good rule of thumb, c4 is going to be good if they cannot play d4. If they can play d4, you're in the cabbage patch. And you better look for the exit sign, because things are about to get rowdy. Alright, so my opponent plays knight h6, I play c4, challenging his pawn. Opponent plays g6, I play knight c3. And looking at this now, if I were to play this again, I would know better and I would just take and go for this structure, because this is known to be very good when they're committing their bishop this way. The bishop is not good in challenging the stonewall structure. Against the stonewall structure, the bishop definitely wants to come out this way, but because my opponent's already pushed g6, he's pretty much locked his bishop into going to this bad square. So yeah, now I know, and I won't be making this mistake again. But anyway, I played knight c3. My opponent played bishop g7. And here I took, my opponent took, and I really shouldn't have gotten frisky with it. I should have just played d4 and been fine. But, you know, I was feeling rowdy. This is a title Tuesday. I thought it was time to go, and so I immediately started attacking with queen b3. Now, herein lies the problem. My opponent can play d4 here. Now things are getting really spicy. I can no longer play d4. If I take this way, my pawns are just going to get broken. So I'm in a pretty tricky situation here. This is really not a good position. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's certainly not that good, because I'm not going to be able to get my desired d4 in. The question is now, if I'm going to go for the structure, how should I go for it under? And the answer is, if I'm going to go for it, I need to at least get him to invest his fianchettoed bishop. And so we have to take with the knight here first. My opponent takes, I take back, I got the really ugly structure, terrible structure, but the good news is, at least I did get his fianchettoed bishop. And so normally in these positions, no matter how ugly your structure is, if you can get his fianchettoed bishop for a knight, it should be around equal. Like if we look at the evaluation, all right, the computer says -0.4. Y'all know what I think about the chess.com computer. It's time to go.
Time to go!
The position is really wacky and really interesting, and as you're going to see, just you always have counter chances because they've weakened all these squares and given up their strong bishop that was meant to protect them. So my opponent castles. I play d5. This is what I have to do. I need to clear the lanes. This is the big problem with this structure, is that as long as however I push these pawns in most cases, they're going to be really blocking my bishops. Like if I play d3 here, well then, okay, I've gotten one bishop out, but the other bishop is still dead. So my plan with d5 was that I just want to push d4, and I want to liberate my pieces. My opponent plays knight f5, and I don't care. I'm playing d4 anyway. If he wants to get the pawn back, that's fine. He takes, I play queen a4. I've achieved what I wanted. I wanted my bishops to have a lot more leeway to get out, and they're doing that. They're getting out. My opponent plays knight f5. I develop, bishop d2. Now things get a little rowdy. Now things get really rowdy. My opponent's aiming for knight c5 or knight b6. Notice that I'm really behind in development here, but the nice thing is that with this pawn on d5, it's pretty hard for him to develop. He can't play knight c6. He can't play bishop e6. Plays knight d7. He's coming out to c5 or b6. I play g4. I'm kicking the knight out. I'm also really committing away from castling kingside. Now my king will never be safe on the king side, having pushed so many pawns. But yeah, at the same time, you got to kick the knight out. You got to do what you got to do. My opponent brings his knight back to d6, and now I put my queen on d4. The beautiful square covering the whole board, centralizing the queen, really strong footing. Opponent plays queen b6, he's attacking b2, attacking d4. This is an interesting rule that I'm about to tell you. Now, it's not always the case, but in general, if you're well developed, you don't really have to worry about queen takes b2. Because normally they're just going to give you so many tempi that it at least evens out. And that's what I was going for here. I just played bishop e3. Opponent takes on b2, I play rook b1, and I start chasing him around the cabbage patch. Man plays queen c2, I play bishop d3, man plays queen g2, I play rook g1, and he takes on h2. And I want to pause for a moment to really emphasize, guys, have you ever seen a position like this in your life? This is really the advantage of playing the bird opening, is that you're going to get these wild positions where literally neither side really knows what's going on, but you probably, if you play these positions enough, you're going to start to get some experience and you're going to start to get a bit of know-how and how to handle these things. The moment I'm down 2 pawns, so yeah, if we count the pawns, I have 4 pawns, my opponent has 6, but at the same time, I have 2 bishops, I have fantastic rooks, my king is a little exposed, but given that my opponent is completely undeveloped, there's nothing really to worry about. And yeah, suffice it to say, white has a really interesting initiative here. I think, maybe black is better. Okay, apparently black is +1. This is the first time I looked at this exact position with the engine. I wasn't worried about that, though. Even in the game, I thought that this position is just completely bananas. My opponent is going to start to choke this. And indeed, he did. So what are we going to do here? We need to continue the pressure. We need to keep up the pressure. I play f5. Opening up the bishop, I want to play bishop f4 and continue to harass this queen. Man plays queen e5, threatening a queen trade. Unfortunately, I'm locked into it. If I move my queen, I'm going to drop the bishop, so I have to move my king over and accept the endgame. My opponent plays b6, and yeah, I thought that the endgame actually was not that bad because I'm going to have fantastic rooks, fantastic bishop, fantastic everything. So I immediately shift over to the h-file for the attack. I play rook h1, he plays bishop b7, I play rook h3. If he wants to trade queens, that's fine, but he's going to have to bring my bishop to the high ground at the same time. He plays rook fc8, I bring my rook over to h1, and now he finally trades. So takes, and as we can see, white has tons of compensation here. Look at this. We got a breakthrough here. We got superb bishops pointing down this. His rook is completely dead over here. His bishop is also relatively useless because my knight is defending this. And yeah, so he actually has some difficulties here. He tries to defend everything with knight f8. And I take here, and the idea with this is that I'm splitting up his pawns. He cannot take in the healthy way because of rook h8. So instead he has to take this way. And now I shift back over to the e-file because now this pawn is made a lot weaker. He's taken with his f-pawn away from the e-file, and so now this e6 score is much weaker. It's going to be very hard for him to ever move this pawn here. I shift over immediately. Rook e1. He plays rook c7, I play rook e3. Piling up on the pawn. If he wants to play something like rook e8, I'm going to try to burrow my bishop in and finally kick his rook out of e8. A cool variation here would be something like rook d8, takes. I'm threatening this, I'm threatening this. He could try to take here, but after this, the game is just over. There's way too much hanging here. All right. My opponent plays king f7, just trying to hold on. I throw in a check. He plays king g8, and now I shift gears. I'm heading for the f-file. I play rook e3. The plan is if I can get my rook to f7, the game is going to be over with threats of rook g7. I do have to be careful, though, because the knight at the moment is guarding it. He plays rook d8. I play king e3. This is a very interesting position. I would bet that the computer is still going to say, yeah, apparently black is winning here. I don't even care about that. This position is just so hard to play as black. Apparently black is winning somehow if he plays like a supercomputer. Objectively speaking, he probably is winning because he just has too many pawns. But at the same time, look at these pieces, man. These pieces are just fantastic. It's time to go.
Wake up and smell the coffee!
My opponent immediately blunders here. Notice he's in the cabbage patch already with only 15 seconds left. This is a very tough position, though. I mean, off the top of my head, I could think about playing knight e4 to trade this knight and bring the rook to f7. So my opponent plays knight c4, and this is just a blunder. I take, he takes, and I can finally drive my rook into the cabbage patch We're going to play rook g7 and play for checkmate. He plays rook c7, and this is just pretty much immediately resignable. I don't think he had anything else, though. He could probably take here. He would have survived, but no, this is still terrible. My rooks are super active. Yeah, I mean, with normally in the bird's opening, it can go from equal to dead loss for your opponent within a few moves. Because the activity is it's so good in the bird. So my opponent plays rook c7, and the game just ends here pretty much. I check here. I take this way. Discovered check. He's pretty much just getting checkmated here. This happened, and I think... What happened here? He played rook e8, I checked, and the game was just over. I checkmated next move. So that was a very interesting game. The takeaways from this game are, if your opponent gets a pawn to d5 like this, you got to be very careful. If you're going to play c4, you can't allow d4. That was my mistake in this position. Back here, I should just play d4, and I'd be fine. I'd be golden. To be clear, if you have not played c4, do you need to worry about d4? Not really, honestly. You don't really need to worry about it at all. Like, if I show you an example, something like this, okay, well, this is a bad example because the rook is hanging, but let's say that this type of position appears. Is this the end of the world? Well, no, because you have not moved your c-pawn yet, and that is really critical. If you have not moved your c-pawn, you'll be able to challenge their pawn at certain junctures with c3. And apart from that, you can also just play e4 and d3, and with your pawn still back on c2, your bishop has a lot more room to maneuver. The whole position you want to avoid is something like this, because in this position now, let's really take stock of what's happened. You can no longer challenge their pawn with c3. Your bishop is completely blocked. The c-pawn is not going anywhere for a very long time. You're never going to get it to b5 for the classic chop. And besides that, how are you going to deal with this boulder? You're just not going to be able to deal with it. You can't play c3 to undermine it. Let's get to this game. This game was really insane. So this game I'm playing Sanan Sjugirov. This guy was a Russian player. I remember studying his games back in the day when I used to read New and Chesses. When I was back in high school, just reading chess magazines nonstop. This guy's extremely strong. I think at one point he was like 2,700. He's dropped a bit. He's like 2,650 FIDE now, but he's still one of the world's strongest players. He's definitely in the top 100. And I play a very interesting game in the bird against him. So f4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, c4, and man plays c5. Man is extremely strong, and he plays the perfect move here. If there's one system that's a bit tricky to play against with birds opening, it's going to be something like this. And the whole issue here is that we cannot play d4 and just steamroll them anymore. If we ever play d4, they split our pawns in half. So we're going to have to go for an anti-Sicilian structure with d3 and e4. And that's exactly what I did. Knight c3, knight c6, e4, d6. He's watching out for any e4, e5 funny business. I play d3, he plays bishop g7, bishop e2, castles, castles, and bishop g4. And we're starting to see the strategic nature of the position evolve. Notice that he's going to take here on f3 and install a knight on d4. That's his whole plan. His plan is just to completely dominate the dark squares. I play bishop e3, he plays knight d7, and here I play queen d2. He plays rook b8, he's going for b5, and I play rook e1 here. So why am I showing you guys this game? Now, on the one hand, you are probably never going to you're never going to play anyone who plays this way if they're below 2,000. I would say around 2,000. Like, this is extremely sophisticated stuff. You would have needed to really study opening theory and structures to think to play this way. Notice my opponent is playing very patiently. He is not rushing here. He's just very slowly trying to expand on the queen side. And this is actually one of the best ways to deal with the bird. Don't get me wrong, the position is still equal, but suffice to say, you got to be careful. I went for a setup here that's very nice. My opponent played a6, and so technically here I actually made a slight mistake. I played bishop d1 immediately. What I should have done is I should have played h3 first, takes, and then played bishop d1. But suffice to say, this is the setup that I really wanted you guys to remember. If your opponent does play in the Sicilian structure and you have to go for this anti-Sicilian, just remember this bishop d1 move. It's very annoying for people to play against. Despite your bishop's awkward position, it's actually dominating their knight. And at some point you might poke out to a4 in certain positions. The position is very dangerous for them because if they ever open the board too much, you do have the bishop pair after all. Your bishop pair doesn't look that great at the moment, but the idea is that you're going to play g4 and f5 and slowly encroach on the king side. The way the game turned out, I got the encroaching on the king side, but I messed it up. So bishop d1, and what happened here? My opponent plays b5, and I play b3. Very important. Do not take here. If you take, now they have more pawns controlling the center, and you're starting to enter the dragon's den. This is not going to be fun for you. They're going to kick your knight out with b4. They're going to play rook a8 to target this pawn. Definitely, if you ever face someone who plays this, remember this b3 move. My opponent takes with the bishop. I take with the rook. He plays knight d4. I play rook f2. My opponent plays e6, and now I play g4. I start to get a little too rushed in the cabbage patch. I remember when I was looking at this with the computer said that this was a mistake. Apparently, I need to stop queen a5. Apparently, in this position, if you want to have like a successful kingside play, you need to keep the queens on the board. And when my opponent plays queen a5, essentially he's going to be forcing a queen trade, which is not going to be ideal. So knight e2 is better. Knight e2 would have maintained equality here. Truth be told, I don't know these positions that well. They so rarely happen in my games that I just have not studied these positions. So I played g4, my opponent plays queen a5. Now I'm starting to enter the cabbage patch. The whole problem here is that in a lot of positions he's going to take, then throw in a check, and scoop up my queen. For instance, if I just ignore his threat, he's just going to throw in a check, and this position is just resignable. A big churrasco is happening on d2 and e1. Alright, so knight b1. I play knight b1 to trade the queens. My opponent takes, I take back. My opponent plays rook e8. And yeah, the game just gets, the game goes super slow here. I play g5. I'm slowly trying to expand. My opponent played a fantastic game, truth be told. Like, I was sort of in shock. I guess he must have a lot of experience playing these positions when he plays the Sicilian, because we've actually transposed back into a Sicilian with this e4, c4, f4 stuff. Because he played a truly stupendous game here. He plays h5, just immediately cutting out my h4, h5 idea. I take on h6, he takes back. I play h4, I'm trying to play h5. He plays king g7, I play h5. Here I have to be careful. If I take back on h5, he's going to hit me with knight c2, and I'm going to be in the dragon's den. So instead I throw in a check. He plays king f8, and I'm intending to take it with the rook. He plays king e7, I take on h5, rook h8, king f2. This is honestly a bit shocking to me. Like, apparently computer says black is slightly better here. It's saying 0.4. I think on higher depths it's like 0.2. If I was looking at this position, I would never assume that white is worse here. Like, it looks completely fine for white. It's astounding that that white would be worse here. But the idea is just that this knight is so good. We do not want to trade this knight off. If we ever trade here, we lose our best bishop. Notice that we have so many pawns committed to light scores, we do not want to trade the dark square bishop. Opponent plays bishop g7, I play rook e1. He trades. Things start to get a little tense. He plays rook g8. And yeah, he's still playing very patiently. I play rook g5 to pin him. He plays king f8. Now here I take on b5. This is where I panicked. I take on b5 and I play a4. And my idea was I'm trying to get a passed pawn on the a file. I should have just stayed patient here. I think if I play something like rook g2, I'm not going to lose this game. So where were we? So I play a4. I'm trying to get my pawn to the edge of the board. He plays rook h8. I play rook g2 to bring my rook back. He plays bishop f6. Things are starting to get a little tricky. His rook could enter in on one of these squares. I have to watch out with my rook. If I play rook g3, he pins me with bishop h4. I play b4 here. I honestly was just choking it. The b4 was definitely a panic attack. He plays rook h1. Yeah, things are starting to get a little bit ugly here. I play rook g1. He checks. I play rook g2. He plays rook h3. Yeah, rook h3 is a very strong move here. He's attacking the bishop. He's threatening bishop h4. I'm starting to enter the dragon's den. I tried to handle this with knight f3, but it's getting very ugly. My pieces are just getting very passive here. If I only had a few moves, I could push this pawn forward and maybe even be winning, but I'm just not going to get the time for that. So my opponent takes. I take back. He takes on a4. I play e5 to start to break up the pawns. He takes. I play bishop c6, poking his knight out. But yeah, he just has too many pawns here at this point. He can take here, threatening another bishop. I took back. But yeah, it's getting really ugly here now. Knight e5 attacks my bishop and pawn. I'm already down so many pawns here. I need to try to keep my bishop pair alive, but there's just no way to. If I move my bishop away, he's going to take on d3, and he's going to be winning the bishop due to the fork. So I have to take here. He takes back. I play b5. I try to get my pawn rolling, but it's just the end of the game. Bishop d4, check, king e2. A very, very strong move here. I'm threatening b6 and b7, but he just plays c4 to sack the pawn, and now his bishop controls all the pawns here. And then he just pushes his pawn forward to the edge of the board. King d1, and the idea is that, you know, maybe if he plays a2, I'm actually getting a draw, but he's a very strong player. He just throws in the check. And notice actually that this check would not even work if my bishop was covering that square, but unfortunately it just isn't. But so check, king c2, he plays a2, and here, with him about to queen, I just resign, because this is getting a bit too dangerous for me. The takeaways from that game are what, exactly? Well, first of all, I do want to assure you, pretty much if you're under 2,000 on chess.com, you will likely never see anyone play this way. If you are above 2,000, just remember this whole setup here. I've had many games at this point in this setup here. I'm still tinkering around with like the nuances, but from what I understand, if you just make sure not to trade queens in the structure, it's completely fine, it's playable, it's dead equal. Not dead equal, sorry, what am I talking about? It's equal with very good chances for both sides. The bishop d1 move is really fantastic, and it's probably going to throw your opponents off balance here. Alright, so now to get to the final game. This is probably my favorite game of the bunch. This is a really beautiful game. I played this game several months ago, and I was kicking myself that I hadn't been recording it during it, because this is literally one of my best, this is maybe my best bird game ever. Apart from the other ones that I've said are the best bird games ever, but this, I think this one is like 98% accuracy. A beautiful game. Buckle up, guys. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, take it away, Ernie. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
So I play f4, my opponent plays b6. He's going for a Queen's Indian setup, and for those who remember, if they play the Queen's Indian setup but they don't control e4, you gotta get into the center immediately. Play e4. Opponent plays bishop b7. I play knight c3. I maintain my beautiful pawns here. He plays e6, and I play knight f3. And I have a beautiful structure here. This whole Queen's Indian defense setup, this is one of my favorite variations. This is one of my favorite chapters. If you bought my bird course, definitely make sure to go through this chapter, because the positions are just insanely beautiful from here. So from here, my opponent plays the best move. My opponent plays what's known to be the strongest move. He needs to split up my pawns immediately. If he plays something like knight f6, we're going to chase him out with e5. That bird course chapter that I talked about, it has some beautiful positions starting from this move here. I can't remember them exactly, but they're really stunning. Something like this happens where, you know, knight takes, bishop takes, we play d4, they play c5, we play knight g5 to hit the bishop. What happens here? They play bishop g6, we play d5, they play bishop e7, we play h4, castles, h5, bishop f5, g4, takes, their bishop's hanging, they have to check, we go here, and now whichever way they take, they're just dead lost. If they take this way, we play d6, and their bishop and queen are frozen. If the queen ever moves, the bishop is going to drop. This is probably my favorite position in the whole course. That's why I know it. But yeah, it's a really beautiful position. All right. So knight f3, my opponent plays d5, and this is the perfect move. He's splitting the pawns up on e4 and f4. In this position, we really have no like perfect response. We would love to play e5 and play d4 with a very nice version of a French advance, but the problem is they're going to play d4 and slice open the board like a slice of pizza. So because of that, I have to take, my opponent takes, and structurally speaking, this actually looks very ugly. Normally, if you get a structure in which the e file has opened and you've already lost your e pawn with a pawn on f4, you're going to have some weaknesses. Luckily for us, though, we're deep in the cabbage patch, but we have the treasure map to know how to find the treasure. We're going to play knight e5 here. Knight e5 is a beautiful move. We're going to play bishop b5 check. The idea is that our pieces are so active, it's okay that we have this structural weakening on f4. If my opponent plays something like knight f6, we're going to play d4. I can't remember exactly how the variations go, but essentially you play bishop e3, g4, and you're going to castle queenside. And the positions are very interesting and very unique. And certainly not bad. They're very interesting, very double-edged positions. So to go back, though, my opponent really wants to test his mettle. He plays d4. This is the most testing move. He's kicking my knight out. He's opening up his bishop. It's time to go. We need to do something here. If we just play a normal move like knight e2, we're going to be a lot worse. They're going to develop. The bishop is slicing through. This pawn has clearly created weaknesses on these light squares, and so for that reason, you know, we have to respond accurately. So I throw in a check. Throwing in the check, the king is pushed around, has to play c6, he blocks the bishop, and now we play bishop c4, and this was the idea. We're attacking f7, we threw in the check to provoke c6 so that the bishop is dead, and now if he takes here, what is the move? I think it's takes here and queen e2. And yeah, this is just the end of the game pretty much. If he plays king d6 to get out of the way, we can take here and we're threatening the knight fork. And we got the piece back. And his king is still on, his king is straight in the middle here, so this is a great position. So bishop c4, my opponent plays knight h6. He's playing the best moves. I play knight e4, getting the knights in. Beautiful knights here. My opponent plays knight d7. From what I remember, he plays all the best moves except for one move, and that's the move that slips him from like an equal, slightly worse position to just a dead loss position. So I castle here, and man plays c5. This was the big mistake. He needed to prioritize castling. He was getting a little too greedy. He was trying to meet the mare twice, and so with c5, he's opening up the bishop. The whole problem, though, is his king is still in the center, and I don't actually need to even observe this threat. I just move my bishop straight back here and poke straight at the king, and now he's in a lot of trouble. If he does something like takes, I'll take here, king e7. Not only is his king in the center, but after bishop c6, he's just losing material. I'm threatening this, and of course he cannot take because of takes with the nice fork. So in this position, he has to play bishop c8, and this is where things are going to get very ugly. I immediately swoop the queen in. I immediately bring my rook to e1 to scope out the king. We're threatening a lot here with the knight discoveries. He plays bishop e7. I play knight c6, queen c7. Notice here I'm attacking the bishop. He still cannot castle now, so I took the moment to develop my queen to a really aggressive square. Queen h5. Yeah, this just this position looks like a disaster. There's just so much that's gone wrong for him here. But I want to emphasize he only made one mistake this game. Like the two mistakes he made were he played the system, which is supposed to be slightly incorrect, and then beyond that he just made a really big blunder that was a very natural move with c5. So, you know, everyone laughs at the bird, everyone calls it the clown opening and everything, but, you know, they're the real bozos because they play moves like this, they play natural moves, and they immediately get taken. They immediately get taken to Clown Town. So queen h5, my opponent plays a6. Here I have a nice variety of tactics here. I have several different ways to win here. I started by taking. If my opponent takes here, we're going to play knight d5, and this is just the end of the game. Pretty much wherever the queen moves out of the way, we're going to just do something like check here. There should be lots of wins here. At the very least, we could win the queen with rook e8. And in fact, this would win more than the queen, because if he takes back, we're going to get another rook. We're going to collect the mango on a8. So because of this, my opponent in this position has to take here, but obviously this is not ideal. So I start by throwing in a check. I'm hitting the king, I'm hitting the pawn. If he plays f6, we're going to take the pawn. He plays king f8. And I really like this game because, you know, if I just retreated the bishop here, it would have to be winning. This position is just too good now. We're too developed. We have the bishop pair. He's already conceded too many weaknesses by pushing these pawns too far. But even so, the bird is an opening of energy. The bird is an opening of initiative. When you play the bird, you better get ready to swoop in, because the bird flies high, and the bird, what's the word for it? The bird, what is the word when the like an eagle like swoops? Yeah, swoops. You gotta swoop fast when your opponent slips up. Knight d6, threatening queen e7 and queen e8, threatening rook e8. If he takes on d6, then we have queen d8 with checkmate. So man is in dire straits here. He plays knight f6, and this is a very interesting position. If I want everyone, honestly, like if you're on a mobile or if you're watching this on some device, maybe it's not possible, but if you can, pause the video and try to find the move here, because this was an incredible move. White to move and win. Obviously, I can cash out with something like knight takes bishop, and that would be winning, but, you know, where is the knockout punch here? Yeah, so the winning move here, the beautiful winning move here, there are lots of wins, truth be told, but the best move is knight e8. A beautiful move. Attacking the queen. I'm also threatening this checkmate here, and he cannot take here because of rook takes with mate. In the game, my opponent just played queen d8, and I take with mate. So that was the game. So moral of the story, moral of this game is what? It's pretty much that the bird is just a baller opening. That's the first moral. And the second moral is that if your opponent plays the Queen's Indian defense, you're gonna have wanted to study the course chapter on Queen's Indian defenses, because if you study it, you're just gonna straight out slaughter people. Like this, it's just gonna get very bad for them. Even if they play the hippo, if they play the hippo, you just do bishop d3, you castle and play f5, and that position is also over for black. So
9:15. Let's have a great day, everybody.